Welcome to Shelf Help. Today we're speaking with Amy Collins, co-founder and CEO of RoRo's baking company, launched around 2011, I believe, out of the Dallas area. RoRo's is a fresh baked good brand born out of Amy's grandmother's homemade recipes. So really excited to get into it, learn more about the journey. So yeah, Amy, first off, just for the listeners that aren't all that familiar with RoRo's, maybe just give quick lay of the land in terms of origin story, kind of why behind the brand, core products in the lineup today, and maybe just a few places people can get their hands on them, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. RoRo was my grandmother. She passed away this January, but she started the company with my husband and I. I was just out of college. I was a nurse. I went straight into working an ICU job, and kind of all during this time got this entrepreneurial bug. I didn't know quite what I wanted to do. And the cinnamon rolls were a tradition in our family. And so she would make them out of her home kitchen. They were a tradition on like Thanksgiving, Christmas mornings. And she would sell them like to friends, family, and people would go nuts over them. And my husband and I got married, and she ended up making like 250 pans over the course of several months and just putting them in her freezer at home. And so they ended up being the wedding favors at our wedding. And then it was that fall went to my husband, my brand new husband, and I was like, let's start a business together. Let's just see what happens. I think that we could sell these. I didn't see, myself being a nurse forever. I kind of like just got this bug that I could do this part-time and see what develops. And so yeah, we put in all the money ourselves. I think we each Goodness, my grandmother and grandfather and us, I think we each pitched in like $3,000 each, got a logo designed, found a shared use catering kitchen that we rented hourly near us, and we just started. And so didn't even really realize where we would sell them, thought that we would do coffee shops, kind of just some local markets here in Dallas. And all of those doors kind of kept closing. Everyone in a coffee shop expects like a really large cinnamon roll. Ours was different. It was in a pan. They were a little bit smaller. And so was introduced to a friend of a friend who worked in a central market store here in Texas. They loved the story and introduced us to the buyer, and she wanted to meet with me. And I met her in the Dallas Lovers Lane store, which is pretty iconic central market location here in Dallas. And she loved it. And by the end of the meeting, walked me over to the frozen set and was like, okay, here's where your product's going to go. This was before any talks on price. She just loved the brand and she loved the story. I wouldn't even say brand. She loved the story and us. We weren't a brand at that point, nor were we trying to be at that point. And so that is what threw us into grocery, the world of distribution. They helped get us set up with a distributor and just started learning the language of what it looks like to sell something in retail. And so that's how we started. We did that hourly kitchen for a couple of years. I would work nights and meet everybody at the bakery every Saturday morning. I don't think we had a traditional weekend for the first couple of years. And we didn't have kids at the time, so we could do it. We had the time. And so it was just kind of the perfect time to jump in and start. Since then, things have grown and are obviously different now in how we operate and produce and do things that we'll get into. But that was really the origin story and what pushed us into grocery. It wasn't something that I think we were initially planning to do. We didn't say I'm starting like the word or the phrase CPG. I never said that until like 5 years ago. Like it was just not on my radar. It was not a thing. I didn't know what it even was. And it wasn't as hot as it is now. But yeah, so that's how we started.
That's great. What led to the thought process to go with the, I guess, pre-baked that then you can reheat versus selling just the dough or fully baked, but in the ready to eat bakery section of grocery stores?
Yeah. So when we started, our main reason was we just basically replicated what she was doing. So she would make these pans, bake them, freeze them, and then had the ability to store them. And so that was kind of the beauty. And what people also liked about the product is that when they heated it up, it tasted like she just made them. And so when we started, I don't think we even entertained the idea of fresh bakery. Shelf life and spoils was something that we didn't want it to go bad. We wanted to really, if we were going to do something, maximize how long that we could even hold on to it. And I think that at the time, like everybody says that frozen is really difficult, which it is. But at the time, I think to us, fresh bakery seemed even more difficult to manage when you don't have distribution. It's just kind of you doing that and what we could kind of lose on that. So, but no, she had the cinnamon rolls and dinner rolls. Those are the two things that she made. And so that was what we really just launched, exactly how she did them. You know, we would hand package everything with dome lids. It was very labor intensive. But yeah, we got a logo. We figured out how to get all the nutrition facts and things like that. We went to school together, she called it, and we got our manufacturing licenses together and all of those things. And so, um, but yeah, it was really just that we wanted to preserve what she was already doing and see if other people loved it as much as we did, was really the initial goal there.
From that visual identity kind of packaging design
Mhm.
standpoint, what were some of the kind of key variables that were top of mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially, so we went through a logo update last fall, and a whole packaging update last fall. And so the initial logo, I just knew I wanted something nostalgic. She, I believe, picked the color. She loved royal blue. I mean, that truly was how we decided the coloring. And then we just kind of worked a step-by-step process. Like, here's what we're thinking. We only launched with the cinnamon rolls when we started. We actually were called RoRo's Cinnamon Rolls originally, and then changed the name of the brand a couple years later once we expanded the line. But yeah, so that was very, I would say, just we wanted something that looked cute, that represented her, something that felt warm. But then as things evolved, and I know we're probably going to jump back and forth here, but went through 2020, the business exploded that year, did really well. That's what the kind of when we transitioned to two different co-manufacturers, we knew that we had to fix all of the elements of our packaging because that was a really big chunk of the cost. And so we knew that we could do that. And so that round, I don't recommend doing it that round. I went to a company that didn't have a ton of CPG experience. It was a recommendation through a printer, and I didn't feel good about it the whole time. And I should have spoken up, but that was just one of those things where sometimes you get so far into something, and if it doesn't feel like it's on brand, like to trust, I wish I would have trusted my gut because we went through that. It got on shelf, fell completely flat. I am obviously not a CPG expert in packaging. And so we did that, got some feedback at the time, thought it was great, was happy with it, quickly realized it was not great. And looking back, I'm just mortified, honestly. And so we actually hired Andy Kurtz with Buttermilk Creative, who's awesome. I went through SKU. He was one of the mentors there. That's how I got connected with him. And I just loved his work. I loved just the nostalgic feel that he brought to a couple of the recent brands he had worked with before us. And I liked him as a person. I felt like he got the brand and RoRo's. And so I think that's a big part is like connecting with who's designing your product, because regardless of if they're going to have the same style, I think somebody who understands truly the feel you're going for, it's really hard to convey feeling sometimes on packaging and authenticity. And so I think he just did a really good job with that and listening to us. We found that having, her picture on the front of the packaging wasn't necessarily, people don't really care about that until they taste it and they like the product and love the product. And then they want to know who she is and who our
Right.
family is. And so I think we learned that kind of lesson through that. And I'm not saying that's the case with everybody. Some people can do that and it works great, but for us, still being relatively unknown in many parts of the country, it just wasn't landing how we thought it would. And so, yeah, our goal was really to lean into taste, flavor, and nostalgia. And those were kind of the subsets that we gave him and brought to him what we really want to convey. And everything else can go on the back. Everything else can be on social media or our website. And that's our job to build that relationship once they try it, but we have to get them to try it. And so yeah, that was kind of the whole backstory of the packaging
Yeah,
growth
that
and
makes
where
sense.
it came from. And I wish we had done it sooner, but it's hard when you invest a lot of money into
Totally.
something and then it's not exactly how you wanted it. And so I felt like we were taking a risk again with Andy, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. So um but yeah, that's just starting to hit shelves finally in everywhere this spring. But yeah, that was something we did last year with
That's
him.
great. That's awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard great things about buttermilk.
Yeah.
You touched on it briefly, but you made that leap, started baking at a small commercial scale
Mhm.
kitchen. Fast forward a few years, I think it was like 2013, you ran a Kickstarter campaign.
Mhm.
I haven't really talked to too many people about Kickstarter. Tell me about that journey,
Yeah.
however
We did
we went
Kickstarter.
through.
I don't even know what's happening with it now, but we did it when it was like pretty exciting and had just kind of had some success stories.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I mean, we made a video, we had a plan, but it wasn't necessarily, I don't think I knew exactly how to maximize that at the time. And so, I think I had mentioned it wasn't a successful Kickstarter. We raised some money, it was helpful. But that wasn't how we initially raised money for the brand. And we truly have never fundraised for the brand, which is also pretty wild. But yeah, so my grandmother was my grandfather got sick very quickly. And so he ended up passing away. And right as we were starting. And so we kind of spent a year and a half in that kitchen I was telling you about, like kind of moving stuff back and forth, storing stuff at her house. It was just crazy. And so she came to me and was like, Amy, I don't want to do this anymore. I believe in this brand. I have this amount of money that I want to give to you. And so she did. I mean, was technically like a friends and family, I guess you could say,
Right,
is what
right.
that equated to. And so she put in a portion of the money for the build out of this facility. We found a warehouse. I became the general contractor of the build out, and I like went to the city. I paid $200. I had no business doing that, but I figured it out. And I talked to some friends who had just recently done a build out himself, and really just I learned, and I searched online and I talked to people, and so yeah, we hired all the subs and figured out what we needed as far as a grease trap, rotating ovens, freezer space, all of that, just to kind of get us to the next step. And I think that everything we've kind of done in our journey was to get us to this next threshold. What do we need now versus trying to plan out 5 years ahead back then, I guess is what I'm saying. So yeah, we did all that. It took about, I don't know, 9 to 12 months to get everything before we were up and running. And then at that point, we hired some staff members. It wasn't just us producing it anymore. I was able to focus a little bit more on just the growth and just kind of getting my head above water of like, okay, we have this business. We're selling in stores in Texas. And how do we incorporate all these other parts that are needed that we've been kind of neglecting because we've just been going back and forth in this chaotic space?
Totally.
So yeah, we stayed there for a while through 2020. Um, and it was wonderful. It was hard work, but just to have a place to produce it and really learn to make bigger batches, larger scale. We certainly were not at scale in that facility, but it was a much larger scale than we could do prior. And it allowed us to expand into more than just, central market, and keep up with that. It was a great stepping stone for us.
Tell me about that decision process of scaling up via deciding to build out your own in-house production facility versus trying to go straight from the hourly kitchen to trying to go find a co-packer. What kind of variables came into play there, and how you ultimately decided, yeah, we're gonna continue to scale up in-house
Yeah.
before we eventually decide maybe we'll go to a co-packer.
Honestly, I think the word co-packer and co-manufacturer probably wasn't even on my radar at that point. I think that we just knew that this wasn't sustainable. That we knew we needed a place just to put our stuff and to produce it. And so I think we probably were starting to maybe look at what that potentially could look like after we were in our facility for a year or so. But no, it was really just to give us a starting point, because we were really limited in what we could produce. And my grandmother at that time was still very involved. She was at the bakery 3 days a week, if not more. And so it was really just a wonderful outlet for us to continue to create it and build it. And I think we wanted to produce it. I don't think we had an initial desire for anyone else to produce it,
Yeah.
especially because we were, figuring out the quality. And, when she started baking it, the one thing we changed, she would use margarine and we switched it to real butter. And so it was just, some things that like your grandmother does that isn't necessarily going to translate to a consumer. And so just those kind of like things you had to figure out along the way and testing out, it didn't exactly scale up from, a 10 quart to a 60 quart. And so working through all of those kinks, I think if we would have tried to do that to a co-manufacturer right out of the gate, it would have been a disaster. Nor did we have the business to, need a co-manufacturer. I think, um,
Sure.
but yeah, to answer your question, it took a while to find one too. And I think for what we make, I think with bars or drinks or things, it's a lot easier. Not that it's easy, but it's easier to find. There's just more of them who do that. And so like a yeast based dough that rises twice, it's labor intensive, that a cinnamon roll, even, it's just a lot more involvement and touch points than people, I think, really understand, which plays into the cost and all of that. And so yeah, for a while, we just truly could not find someone that was doing what we needed them to do. That would even listen to us. There was a couple here that are just massive, and we just weren't at the scale to need it. And so, yeah, that's kind of why we started,
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
which I'm super
Yeah, it
glad
makes
we
a lot of
did,
sense.
because I think if we hadn't have made it ourselves, there would just be no way for that quality to still stay there, even through transitioning to co-manufacturer. So yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it's also, you got to a certain scale, understand what it looks like to make your rolls at
Yeah.
the quality that you want at least a bit of a larger scale, which I'm sure helped
Yeah.
as you were onboarding with a co-packer. I often talk to brands, and when they're making that shift to co-pack and really getting ready to scale up, there's often you have to make some decisions around potential formulation changes
Sure.
or production process changes just to be able to transition from a smaller kind of self-manufacturing environment to much larger scale co-packers in terms
Hmm.
of just creating more efficiencies, using their larger scale equipment, that kind of stuff. Did you have to make any big changes in that front when you did eventually shift to a co-packer?
We did. And so we shifted in 2021, right when everything was starting to go up in cost significantly that year. So I would say, so we were planning to do it. I know that we had talked about we have two different manufacturers. That wasn't my choice at first. We were planning to have everything produced here and got really close into that situation. And then they decided that it didn't make sense for them to produce the cinnamon roll item. And so had to scramble, and thankfully found our manufacturer now that we have a wonderful relationship with. And now I'm glad that it's split at this point, just because it kind of diversifies some things. But yeah, so I mean, we had to change the shape of the roll. We made a decision to
Okay.
change that. When we started, it was a crescent roll shape, which is something that we'd love to bring back and plan to at some point. But at the time, it was either to change the recipe or the shape, because costs were just killing us. And so we decided to change the shape. And so that was something. When it's a personal brand like that, it's really hard to even change things that some people just don't even care about, but you care about. Thankfully, with the cinnamon roll scaling up, I mean, we have not had to touch that recipe, which is amazing. The rolls, with changing the shape, we had to, obviously alter some bake times. There's the butter ratio changed a little bit with that, just because the way it's not rolled up versus on top. And so we had to kind of tweak, adding more on top of the rolls and things like that. But no, I mean, I think that was a big learning curve. One of our buyers once told me, she was like, never move to a co-manufacturer when you're launching into a new account. And I was like, why? Like, it'll be fine. And so, but yeah, I just think there was a lot of, nothing ever goes right on the first time.
For sure.
It is
Oh,
always something that feels like the end of the world when obviously it's not. But yeah, I think that the roll manufacturer, I think, was difficult because they're a larger manufacturer. And so that was the most different than how we were producing things. Our first day, I walked in like with everything, measured out in our measuring cups. And he was like, Amy, I don't have any measuring cups in this facility. Like, you need to give me the weights. Like, what are you doing? And that kind of forced us to really commercialize it and to get everything accurately weighed out. It really just kind of legitimized the business to an extent for all of our recipes, and everything is very well documented, and weights that can scale up and translate to different, producers and things like that. So it kind of forced us to do that, which was good, but it was definitely a huge learning curve, big pain point in the business, just a lot of growth and stretching with that change.
yeah.
You lose control.
You mentioned that there aren't as many co-packers out in the world that can produce the types of products that you have with the yeast and whatnot. And I just know in general, there aren't, a lot of readily available just lists of co-packers, co-manufacturers out there in the world. Some of them I think don't even have websites and
No,
whatnot.
yeah,
I'm curious, did you go about actually finding the two that you're working with today? And I guess how did you ultimately know that they were the two
yeah.
right ones, at least for the time?
Well, I spent 2 solid years searching and looking and calling and visiting. There was a few that we got kind of far in the stage, and then the cost was just outlandish. There was no way that it was going to work. And so it's very difficult. And they definitely are there. It's, do they make something, and are they already having lines that are in line with what you do? For one of our facilities, we invested in a piece of equipment that they didn't have. Like, that was obviously a very expensive, risky thing, which is, we own that equity, but at the same time, like, it's a give and a take. You're most likely not going to find a facility that does everything exactly how you need to do it. And so that was hard, because there were some, non-negotiables as far as just how things are produced, ingredients that are used, things like that. My husband found one of them in a Google search, and I swear I was like, how in the world did you find this? I've been searching for like a year and a half, and they just come up, and that ended up being one of the ones we go with. we went with, and we still are with them, and it's been great. It's very hard to find. There's lists, and you can search co-manufacturer list and kind of,
It's gotten easier for
yeah.
sure, I think in the past year.
But it's not. There may be somebody that says they do cakes or brownies, and you call and they're like, "Oh, we don't do that anymore. We just do, these things." And so there's a lot of that. And there's a lot of people that, will say that they do these things, and then, it's just not exactly what you thought. But it takes a while. And I think if you self-produce before, which I do think has benefits, and I would highly recommend to a lot of people, if not all in CPG, at least to produce it for some time. It allows you to know like what's not okay and what's just kind of a deal breaker versus if you're going to bring something to market, it has to taste good. It has to be a good quality. And I think that a lot of times that can be missing if you don't have like that direct contact with the product and really know what exactly it's supposed to taste and look like. If you're just kind of going in with a formulation, it's just hard to get that, I think.
Yeah, totally. If you had to just throw out, I don't know, one or two recommendations for some up and coming operators that are a few years behind you, they're about to start search, and then once they find one, actually make that
Mhm.
transition.
I think if you and your gut feel like it's not right or the quality's not there, you have to speak up and say something. I think it's so easy to feel like you are just this small fish in this huge facility, and that they're doing a favor for you, and like that you have to speak up for yourself, and you can't, because that's going to translate to shelf. And we've had an experience where the quality wasn't what it was supposed to be and product was in stores. And so it's like, if somebody tried this and didn't have a good experience, like we're never going to have that person again. And so I think even if you're going to lose some money, to speak up if something's not right, I think that that's key for your long-term brand success, and just realizing that it's a partnership, that it's not just a one-way street. Have all of your recipes, own all of your recipes. Some people will go in and tweak things and then document everything and just make sure that, you have ownership of that.
Yeah.
And I would physically visit them, meet them, see what they're like, see how they treat their staff, and really just feel, because that's going to translate into the products that they're making for you. And so yeah, it's hard. It's not fun to kind of have to stay on top of things. Your job shifts, especially if you move from production to co-manufacturing. You are now a middleman who is kind of managing a lot of moving parts, and that can have its own set of stressors and also benefits. You can place an order and have something to your facility, whereas it would have taken us, a couple of months to make, they can make in a few days. And yeah, I think there's wonderful benefits to it, but it can also definitely be challenging. I think just going in with, you know, feeling confident and that you are the brand owner, that this is your product, but also really building a relationship is key. And I think kindness also goes a long way.
Shifting gears a little bit, talking about more retail go to market
Mhm.
side of things. You touch on the frozen section category a bit towards the beginning. What have you found is kind of unique about this frozen
Yeah.
category?
So Frozen is revamping, which I know it's all over LinkedIn and stuff, but I do feel like Frozen is having a moment. And
Yeah, totally.
whereas before, I feel like there just wasn't a lot of options. Even now, like if you look in our set, you will see a lot of things that look like they were produced or, invented 20 years ago, or launched brands, which most of them were more than that. But I feel like nothing has really evolved with the consumer and where they are and just what they like to look at, as far as a shelf presence. And I think there's a lot of just inauthenticity that is very clear, in Frozen. And so I think it's been really fun to see, not only us, but other brands just come in with, joy and color and, um, no preservatives. Like there's something that you look on the back of the packaging, and there's going to be a slew of ingredients that have just been there forever, um, that aren't even needed. And so I think that our consumer who's, buying our product sees that, they see through that. And so I think it's a really unique opportunity to come in and just be a real family brand. And I think that that's being done with some other companies and in other spaces of frozen, that, you see the founder, you see the story, and that hasn't really been done before in this space. I think it's done really well in a lot of other sections of the grocery store, but frozen bread especially, it's a lot of giants and then a couple little guys, coming up the ranks. But there is still a huge gap there and a lot of opportunity, um, to disrupt. So yeah, I think that frozen is definitely on everybody's radar. So it's pretty fun to be part of it all.
It's definitely the talk of the town these days for
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
reasons. It seems like that's one of the challenges is merchandising standing out in the aisle a bit more. Obviously, you're behind a
sure.
glass door when someone's walking down the frozen aisle, and you want them to kind of draw their attention to
Yeah.
Roros.
I mean, one of the main changes we made was if you look at the name of the product, cinnamon rolls, dinner rolls, Parker House rolls, it's all huge. Whereas before it was a very small thing. The brand logo we made smaller, and then the colors, they're not as muted, they're very bright, they're eye catching. And so just from a shelf perspective, I feel like when you look at it on shelf, it pops. And so that's something we've changed to try to gain somebody's attention in those few seconds. Another thing is we do a lot of partnering with influencers and local, moms and things. I think that that's a really good way. We do a lot of something we're trialing is kind of adding on digital offers. We've
Mhm.
found that we've been gaining a very large percentage, like 80%, I think, of first time buyers through that. And so really just
Oh
gaining
wow.
trial in a more affordable way. And so just doing some things that are maybe that people do, but is a little bit outside of the box. And then our packaging, as we've updated it, and those images are kind of flowing through on your apps and stuff. It's just much brighter also and catches your attention and just looks like just a feeling of joy and happiness. And so I think that is really, we can't do stuff in the aisle, unfortunately, and all those kinds of things. But yeah, and also being selective in how we promote and what we in certain stores, testing out certain promotions, seeing how they perform, seeing what doesn't. We've kind of learned like what price point gets people to try it, what price point isn't worth the investment. And that takes time and a lot of trial and error and just looking at, the data. We stay on top of looking at that every month and things like that. So yeah.
Are demos a part of your guys' strategy?
It
I feel
has
like
been. We
well,
first started, we were doing demos all the time, and we still do
okay.
demos, but I have found if it's not us doing demos, they're not as successful as far as if you're going to spend the
Yeah.
money to do it. And so I think in certain stores, they work better than others that we found as far as resonating with the customer. So it is something that we do still do. And I definitely like trade shows, things like that. When we sample, that is highly our most effective way. We've been able to go to different headquarters for retailers and sample there. I think that's also like a big part of what helps just get excitement and trial, where you don't have to spend necessarily as much money, but just get a big group of people to try them. Yes, sampling is definitely by far. It's just you have to be careful in how you do it. We send boxes to people to pass out to their neighborhoods, those kind of like grassroots things. But yeah, I think frozen, it's a little bit harder as far
Yeah.
as doing, getting people's attention than it is sometimes in um, grocery or things like that, the dry aisles. But
From a DTC standpoint, I believe you guys focus on partnering with Goldbelly.
so we do a lot of e-commerce on our website. So 2020 was like half of our business for D2C, which is crazy for frozen. Once now we've moved into more retailers, we're in about 1,300-ish stores. And so now that they can get them more places, we've really focused on in-store. But no, Goldbelly, we met at the Fancy Food Show, those guys, like right when they started doing Goldbelly. And so we've been with them for a really long time. And so we do a lot of our drop shipping from there. We've had a lot of Good Morning America features. And so we will sell a bunch of product within a 24-hour period. And so that's a really big e-commerce boost for us. And then we kind of try to build that and grow that email list and kind of push them where they can also find them in stores. And so that's been a really big part of why we built the brand. But yeah, Goldbelly is nice. Things like that are nice because the items, they kind of land into both gifting and grocery. So they can kind of get away with playing in both spaces. Grocery and retail is definitely are the majority of our business now, but especially when everyone was on lockdown and everything, that's when we just started to really grow that D2C business. And so um
Yeah.
but yeah, they're different animals, obviously, but I think there's benefits to both, and there's different needs and customers that want both, and yeah, that's how we've kind of grown that. Yeah,
That makes total sense. Product roadmap standpoint.
we're really careful not to oversaturate and overextend ourselves. We brought back some favorites. So we have like a pumpkin spice cinnamon roll, a cranberry walnut cinnamon roll. Those were favorites before we kind of started not producing them. And then we launched a jalapeno cheddar Parker House roll this winter. And so that'll be in stores here coming up. And so As far as the process, it's very important to us to stay true to who we are, stay true to something that my grandmother made, that are her recipes or built on her
Mhm.
recipes as far as product extensions. And so I think staying in the roll space as we're still establishing ourselves is really important. And then we're testing out doing some rotating SKUs, like seasonal SKUs that you see. Refrigerated does this really well. End caps and stuff for holiday, people get super excited, but frozen has never really done this. So that's something we're trialing to do, a SKU for the first through every quarter, basically, swap that out with a different seasonal item, but still
Yeah.
have that brand block on shelf. So it's not just something and really build excitement and trial. And so that's going to be a way that we test out some new items as well and just seeing what sticks, what's successful, what's something that people really resonate with without having to, invest in all that comes with launching an item because it's expensive, the packaging, the
Right.
design, everything. And you have to, if it's not selling, then, you've just kind of wasted a lot of time and money. And so I think just being a little more strategic in how we trial out some of that. But yeah, as we grow, I mean, we have some ideas for some, extensions. I think that for now, we want to stay in the frozen space, in the frozen bread, sweet roll category, and roll space. I think there's a lot of opportunity that we still have where we can maximize what we're already doing. And so that's kind of our core focus right now.
Super logical. Um, yeah, I mean, it's some super impressive 1,300 plus stores at this point, bootstrapped, had a lot of success. I think other side of things, some of the best learning experiences come from when things didn't go exactly as expected. Looking back, anything you kind of would have done
Mhm.
differently that might be helpful for some other up and coming operators that are a few years behind where you are.
I mean, man, the whole packaging thing was pretty much a disaster. So I'd say that that was one of them that I regret and wish that I spoke up sooner or followed my gut instinct. But yeah, I think that that's one of them, a big one for me. But I'm also really happy with where we landed. I'm a big believer in, there are going to be roadblocks. There are going to be mistakes. There's going to be a lot of no's. There's going to be things that you think are going to be great and are just not. I mean, we've done different shows that I thought was going to be highly successful. I've gone into, buyer meetings like with this expectation that, oh, this is happening. And then it's a no, for a couple of years. And so I think just kind of also like realigning your expectations that it's going to ebb and flow. It's going to be, if you're getting into this business, it's going to be great days and really difficult days and not everything that you think is great at the time, such as our packaging debacle, um is how you actually see it. And so I think for me, like having other mentors and people around me to kind of help just shed light, so you're not just doing it just with your core team of people, but that you have other people and other perspectives just to kind of speak into some things that maybe you're blinded by because you're so in it. And so I think that that was a big lesson for me.
Both super helpful, really helpful. You mentioned trade shows. What have you found is kind of your favorite one personally?
So we have done a lot of the fancy food show. I did Expo East before it changed. I've been to Expo West, not our own booth. That's something that we haven't done, which I feel like in this world, it's, you have to do those things. But I don't think you have to do those things. I think that you go to the shows where you feel like you're going to get the biggest return. And so
Yeah,
I'm trying to think what else. We've done some distributor shows. NFRA is a show we've done for Frozen. I feel like that's good. But yeah, I feel like fancy food is probably one of the more fun shows with and a lot more results than I think some people have thought. And it's a little bit smaller, a little bit more manageable as far as building relationships. And so,
yeah,
and that was kind of the first before all these other things happen. So it's been really neat to see just the evolvement of trade shows, even. But yeah, I think they're
right.
wonderful. I think it's a big way. I feel like we've never gone to one that I can recall and something hasn't panned out, whether that's 2 years down the line from that initial connection. So I do think that they're valuable and you can, go to them every year or you could take a year off. I think just going based on the needs of your business and not feeling like you have to be at everything is also important. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You've been in the
Mhm.
CPG space for a while now, definitely in
Sure.
the frozen aisle. Any brands or specific brands or just kind of trends in the space in general that you've been kind of tracking or things that have popped up in your radar that's gotten you kind of excited?
Yeah, I mean, I have other brand friends that I love. I went through with the leisure guys are doing amazing. We were in food together.
Yeah, they're
We
great.
have friends, a dear friend Carrie Moore and Callie's Biscuits there and Frozen and doing great. And so I think just leaning into nostalgia, something sweet. I love those girls. I saw she was on here and really just leaning into who you are and authenticity. And I think there's a real desire for connection that people are looking for. I think that that is translating to what they're buying and what they're connecting with on shelf. And so I don't know, it's fun to see other family brands on shelves that are, whether that's siblings or family members or mother, daughter, things like that. I think that it's exciting to see that there's a place for that and that it's becoming a more mainstream option for people to buy. And so it's fun to be a part of that because I think all the bigger players in the space, that authenticity piece is the key piece that I feel like is missing. And it's not something that you can replicate or recreate easily. And so I think it's just a really unique time and why Frozen is doing so well is because that's just kind of coming back. There's an expectation there from customers. And so it's exciting to see. And I'm cheering all of them on too. So
Totally.
it's been fun.
Yeah, Amy, this has been awesome. Really appreciate the time. It's been super informative. I think this will be really helpful for other operators in the space that are maybe a few years behind you. But yeah, what's the best place these days to people to follow along with you, and then best place for people to follow
Yeah.
along with
Well,
the brand as well?
the brand is our Instagram is just RoRo's Baking Company. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We post a lot of like the behind the scenes updates of my life and stuff, which has been fun and connecting with people on there. And then we're in retailers all throughout the Southeast, Southwest. So Whole Foods, Harris Teeter, we're in Gelson's now, across finally into California. So, but lots. So, our store locators on there and you can find where we are. But yeah, a lot of retailers in Frozen.
Perfect.
So thank you so much.